But what's really, really cool about this is you can see really on-chain how many rewards each of these different smart contracts are receiving. Yeah, so it's really designed to be customized, flexible for the dApp developer to charge what they think their smart contracts are worth. What's so interesting is that's just always been our North Star, is to build a community that's extremely developer friendly. And I think developers are starting to take notice, which is cool.
Hi, Griffin. Thank you very much for joining us here. This is the Chorus One podcast. This is my first time hosting it. I'm super excited. And so we're here with Griffin today, one of the founders of Archway, very recently launched Cosmos Network in Mainnet in early July. So this is the second time actually that we have Archway on the Chorus podcast. So the idea would be to do a follow-up on how the network has been evolving and to also bring any insights from the launch on Mainnet. So thank you, Griffin, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to talk with you.
Great. I think we could skip backgrounds today because we covered that in depth on the first episode. So as a brief summary from the first episode, just for the ones that didn't watch, but I really recommend watching it. We will share the link here in the description of this episode. We talked about, we covered the main value added from Archway, that it brings a mechanism that's quite unique to economically incentivize app developers, that also represents an alternative to the teams to monetize instead of selling governance tokens. That's the default way that we have in most in the crypto space in general. So I'm curious to understand what is your role and responsibility at Archway at the moment, and perhaps how has this been changing over the course of the project?
Yeah, for sure. I'm really excited to talk with you. Let me just, if it's okay, I'll just kind of get the disclaimer out of the way real quickly. But my views and opinions expressed on this podcast are my own and don't necessarily represent that of the Archway Foundation or Fry Labs. And obviously, this doesn't constitute or should not be considered a formal offer, sell, or solicitation, or an offer to buy any security in jurisdiction, legal advice, investment advice, or tax advice. If you're in need of all that, please consult a professional. Sorry, I have to get the legal disclaimer out. Yeah, a little context. So currently right now I run a company called Phi Labs. It's one of the core contributors behind the Archway protocol and the Archway Foundation. So we work very closely with the Archway Foundation and help and support on many different fronts, including helping to build the actual protocol itself and contributing in meaningful ways, contributing across the growth side of things and in a number of different capacities. Yeah, so it's been a really exciting journey, but we're one of the main core contributors behind the Archway protocol.
Cool, interesting. And what exactly is your focus on Archway then? Are you responsible for development questions, the solutions that the protocol target when you have any technical discussions to approach specific issue, or are you more on the business side or ecosystem development? What is your main focus there?
Yeah, so our focus as a core contributor is we have a number of different initiatives and agreements with the foundation, but the overall purpose is to help drive the protocol development of the actual code base, help provide supporting infrastructure and tooling and development tooling around the protocol. In addition, help the protocol basically grow into, hopefully one of the top L1s in the broader ecosystem. My role at Phi Labs is primarily, I would say, the CEO, but really at the end of the day, the glue. My job is to kind of keep everybody aligned and focused and moving in the right direction and supporting the broader ecosystem as best as possible.
Interesting. I've always wondered, and what exactly is the role of the foundation behind a project like Archway?
Yeah, so the foundation is really the stewards of the code base behind the scenes and the stewards of the protocol as itself. There's a separate group of individuals that are independently running the foundation at this point, and in all these decentralized Web3 ecosystems, really at the end of the day, you can't do everything and you shouldn't do everything. It really should be decentralized. There should be many different stakeholders from all different kind of parties contributing to a protocol. And so very early on, the foundation was set up by a bunch of independent folks to basically steward um, the underlying protocol. And so they have a couple mandates. First of which is obviously to make sure that the success of the protocol comes to fruition, but also like to really manage and support any governance proposals that come through on chain, help allocate grant money and deploying ecosystem funds to the broader ecosystem. Their job is basically to like build like the big city. I would kind of call them like maybe the mayor of the city, and we're just one business inside the city at this point. We're one contributor to this bigger pie. And so yeah, the foundation's goal, they have a whole mandate over there, and separate team and separate budgets, and they have full autonomy other than what is being directed by the actual token holders of the protocol. And so, that's kind of the role of the foundation. And then Phi Labs is a software development company, is basically there to provide support and additional initiatives around the protocol based on the direction of the foundation. Yeah, it can be a very complicated and confusing topic, but that's how a lot of the Web3 protocols and ecosystems do it nowadays.
I've been wondering, now Archway is live on Mainnet. So by the way, congratulations, not even 1 month. So very early days yet.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
So I'm curious to understand how has the idea changed during the development process since you guys envisioned building Archway? Is there anything that changed dramatically because of like any kind of restrictions or challenges on the development side? Or do you think there weren't many surprises?
Ironically, the vision of the North Star has always been the same since the very beginning. Surprisingly, the community hasn't necessarily changed that. It's always been the goal is to be like a very developer-friendly chain, and to build inside this protocol a system that basically rewards on-chain contributions. And so that really hasn't changed. And, the broader goals around implementation haven't necessarily changed either, which is kind of surprising because the community and the core contributors have been working on this protocol for close to 3 years now before launch. And so it's really been this really strong North Star that everybody's been skating towards. But with that being said, obviously the strategy and the tactics of how to go about achieving the goals and achieving the different objectives and the nuances around implementation and so forth obviously have changed, right? In this environment. Web3, if you work in the industry, obviously goes extremely quickly and very, very fast. And it feels like every quarter or every 6 months, you have to reevaluate strategies and goals and objectives across the board. So while the North Star has always stayed the same and really hasn't changed that thesis, the way about going after the North Star definitely has changed quite a bit over the last couple of years.
Cool. Yeah, so surprisingly, it hasn't changed that much in terms of the value added for the network, but I think it's a good thing, right? That you could implement what you envisioned first initially. I think that's very good. Like on the human level, how do you think you have changed? Like, is there any insights from the Griffin that you started the project for the Griffin today after Mainnet?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of changes on a personal level. I'm definitely probably working a lot longer hours than I probably used to. I think just the nature of launching a network and being live, there's just a lot of things we're constantly trying to solve and problems we're trying to solve. Definitely, I've had a lot of management experience personally in the past, but going through this exercise and so forth, you learn a lot about working with people and individuals. You learn, I would say I'm probably no better at hiring or driving a team than I was at the beginning, but you just learn all these lessons along the way. That's been kind of fun to hear and see. We're just been doing this for a very long time, very laser focused, but on a personal level, learned a lot more about people and structure and organization and things like that I probably wasn't completely aware of too much when I first started.
Thanks for sharing something on your personal experience. That's also something that I think might be valuable for the audience or for those who are interested in launching a project or it's already running some project and need to learn from more experienced founders. So on the technical side of Archway, when everybody talks about like, oh, okay, if you build on Archway, you'll be participating on um, inflation or transaction fee. I'm curious to understand on a practical level, how would that work? Like, what does a developer need to do to claim the rewards? So, like, how does this process look like since the deployment of a contract?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So what happens is a developer builds a smart contract. Today we are Archway Protocol is a WebAssembly virtual machine. And the primary language most of the developers today are building in is in Rust, even though the WebAssembly virtual machine can support other programming languages. So most of the time, the smart contract developers go ahead and build and test code in a Rust-based smart contract versus if you're on the Ethereum side, obviously it's more Solidity or a different language. And so they go ahead and build that language. And then what's so interesting is what's unique is the deployment process on chain. So when they get ready to deploy their compiled code on chain, what basically happens is they set in the parameters, additional parameters that they would like to pre-specify for on chain. So they can set an address or a contract address in which they want all the rewards to accrue towards. They can set something called like contract premiums. And what this is just for your viewers, we inside the protocol, developers get rewarded in three different ways. And the third way is something called contract premiums. It's like this additional fee that you can add to your smart contract that you receive every time somebody interacts with that smart contract. The other two is gas fees and inflation. And I'm sure your viewers can go back and listen to the first podcast to understand that a bit more. But yeah, what happens is when they deploy that contract, as soon as they deploy it and somebody interacts with that smart contract on chain, they interact with it, you'll start to receive rewards. And that's all on chain, completely visible. There's some dashboards currently popping up that maybe we can include in the notes section of this podcast. But what's really, really cool about this is you can see really on chain how many rewards each of these different smart contracts are receiving. So similar to like staking or delegating or validating for a chain, your rewards are automatically being accrued. And then the way it works is, so it's all there. And then similar to like withdrawing staking rewards from delegating, same thing happens for the dApp developers. So they basically just, when they're ready, they sign a transaction and withdraw the rewards. And what's so cool about this process is with 3 years of development, the community has built this protocol in a way that works very much like delegating or validating, but is also happening at the smart contract layer. And so it's pretty easy for any developer who's familiar with deploying contracts on chain. It's a very similar process. The only unique thing I would say is on deployment is these additional parameters and then the ability to basically withdraw the rewards after you accrue some over time. And so that's really, really fun to see that all kind of come to play fruition. First time that anybody else has done something like this.
That's super cool. So in the end, I can deploy a contract like a DEX and already include a fee, like a minimum fee that I would like to receive for any transactions, like every time that someone interacts with my contract. So the final user would, in the end, pay the gas fee plus the fee of the contract. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me specify that a little bit, make it clear. So so whenever you deploy a contract to Archway and somebody interacts with your smart contract, Typically, the way these Web3 protocols work is somebody pays the smart contract gas fee, okay? And the Archway protocol has done a lot of work to basically uh, design this gas fee so that some of it goes and gets burned, and then in a later version here, and then some of the gas fee will go back and redirect to the DApp developers. So whenever somebody signs a transaction and pays that gas fee, half goes, currently right now it's set to validators, but it's about to be burned, and then the other half goes to the DApp developers. And so that's very interesting. So then what happens is you will get part of that, you'll get half that gas fee, and you'll get some inflation on top of that automatically out of the box if you just deploy on chain. And then there's this additional feature called contract premiums. So when you add that additional fee to your smart contracts on deployment, that's an added fee, an added toll fee that gets attached to the gas fee automatically and is abstracted away. So instead of paying like, I'm just going to use simple rounded numbers here. Instead of paying one arch for the gas fee, you could set the contract premium to two arch. And so the end user ends up paying not just one arch for the gas fee. The end user ends up paying three arch for the gas fee. So the user, it's a very small fee. It can be set to whatever you want it to be set at. There's some smart contracts might want to keep it at zero or set it at a very low rate. Like if you're building a DEX or something like that, maybe you have really high transaction volume and you only want to charge a little bit for your smart contracts. You can set the price pretty low. Let's say you're building like an NFT series and in that NFT series, you want to basically, there might be a trade once a week or once a month or something like that where somebody sells an NFT to somebody else. Or maybe you want a really high contract premium for that. Maybe you want to charge 20 arch or something like that to make that swap and transaction to happen. And so what's really interesting, it's all baked in at the protocol layer. And so there's different reasons for different ways you would want to charge for. But what's so interesting is you can charge and set and adjust it whenever you want. And then all those rewards, whatever you charge, automatically go to the contract address or personal address that you set on deployment. So you get those right out of the gate. Every block, you're going to get those rewards, which is pretty cool. And yeah, so it's really designed to be customized, flexible for the DApp developer to charge what they think their smart contracts are worth at the end of the day.
Super clear. Thank you very much. And yeah. I imagine that those values may change with, according to the level of maturity of the ecosystem or the DApp. So is the contract upgradable in terms of if the DApp team want to change the address to receive the premiums or even the fees that they charge? Because I imagine they can, for example, if the app starts to having much more activity, then perhaps you can even make lower the premium and you want to change. So what would be the process? They would need to do a new release, for example, and like just a fork of the project, or would be able to use the same contract? How would that work?
Yeah, great question. They definitely can update their contracts. Everything, to my best of my understanding, is updatable. And so what they do is they just, there's an owner address to this stuff. And what they can do on deployment is just re-update the variables at the end of the day. So similar to what you're saying, if a contract gets a lot of usage and, maybe the end users are complaining that the fees are too high, or you don't think they're high enough, you can dynamically adjust that and change that, which is kind of interesting. What gets even more and more interesting in this Web3 space is, so typically if you look at a lot of big projects on top of Ethereum or any of these major L1s, they're very composable. Typically one application calls another application that calls another application. And what's so interesting with all this is you can set those contract premiums and charge like interchain contracts a fee. So For instance, if you built an Oracle service and somebody's building a borrowing and lending service and they need to look up the pricing data in your Oracle service, you can charge them a contract premium for them to use your pricing information. So what's really cool is like in this weird assembly line where every DApp is interacting with every other kind of DApp, you can charge what you want and you can charge other contracts what you want. So you can set your own market prices for somebody to use and interact with a contract. And there's all kinds of reasons for doing that. One is like, Oracle services, for instance, where you might have to pay a lot of off-chain services or off-chain fees, or maybe you want to charge a higher fee because you're covering a bunch of off-chain expenses. Maybe you're building a stable coin or tokenizing some asset class, and a bunch of DeFi protocols are interacting with your assets. Well, you can charge whatever you want for them to like integrate and use your assets, which now provides you a business model and an on-chain a model for you to basically interact with your different dApps. So it's very composable. It allows developers to really just focus on specific primitives. They can just focus on individual open source libraries that add value to the broader ecosystem, and they don't even necessarily have to build a complete dApp completely from scratch, which is interesting as well.
That was super insightful. For at least for me, nothing better than like really trying to see in practice how the network is used and like the use case behind it. It's very insightful. And how about the Cosmos? Because on the first episode, you guys mentioned that you were really focused on trying to improve the development experience around Cosmos. Is there any like hot insights on that matter?
Yeah, I think we're still in the early days on the tooling side around Cosmosm at this time. There's luckily probably since the last time we came on this podcast, there's definitely a lot more other community members contributing to tooling across the space, which is great. Yeah, Phi Labs has been focused on a product called Area 52, which is an online education course, which teaches developers how to build Cosmosm contracts from start to finish. If you ever played with the Ethereum version of Crypto Zombies, it's kind of like in that nature. It's like a tutorial, online tutorial. It's fun. It's got great pictures and a great storyline and things like that. So it's really cool. It teaches developers how to build REST-based smart contracts. Phi Labs and within the broader community are focused on building CLIs and abstracted libraries and things like that, just to expedite the time to market for a dApp developer to build a dApp. So historically, previously, it'd be really, really difficult to go out and build a dApp. You'd have to build a lot of custom libraries. You have to understand, a lot of the technical nuances of how these virtual machines work. And right now, the team and the community is focused in on all kinds of libraries to basically abstract that and make the life of developers much, much easier, including like testing and linting tools and the like, front-end libraries to quickly integrate command line interfaces, SDKs, the whole 9 yards. So those are all at different development stages. But what's really cool that we've been working on over the last, the community has been working on for the last 6 months or years, just a lot of really robust tooling just to expedite and speed up the time it takes to go build apps, generally speaking, both on Archway and any other Cosmosm chain.
Great, excited. I think it will be something very useful for the whole Cosmos ecosystem for sure to expand. Also thinking in terms of the humans behind the Archway team. Do you have any profile behind the team? Are they usually coming from Web2 or mostly crypto native, and what like size of the team?
Yeah, so I can speak to Phi Labs, which is the core contributor. So at Phi Labs, we're about 35 people. We're spread out around the globe. We have folks in most of the major cities around the globe. Really worldly from the start, I guess. You can think of it that way. A lot of folks that come from the Web3 space, but might have been working in Web3 for a year or 2 years. And then we have a lot of the core team within Phi Labs have a deep experience. Like going back to personally, I got into this all back in 2015. A lot of the core team kind of first got into Web3 and clicked around probably 2017 when that major back in the day around the Ethereum space, when a lot of people first kind of entered into that space, there was a lot of people coming in at that around that time. So yeah, a lot of the core team's been around for 5-6 years, deep experience. We have a lot of the engineers that come from a lot of the other layer one protocols, whether Polkadot community or Solana or Cardano or Ethereum community. They're all coming around from a lot of the L1s and have been working in the space for a long time. So deep experience, deep Web3 experience. We're a bit more inside Fly Labs, like more of a seasoned team, I would say, out of the box. I would say a lot of sometimes the Web3 protocols, it's like a lot of crypto, I'm going to call it degens or folks probably a bit earlier in their careers. We have a really strong mix of individuals. We have folks that have 30 years of experience and, worked at Coinbase. And then we have, folks that are just a few years out of school and up and down. We kind of like the mix because I think everybody brings a different perspective and angle to building and contributing. More broadly, though, inside the Archway community, what's been really fun is seeing a lot of the Archway community and the ecosystem and the other folks that are in there. It's obviously a lot of Cosmos people are actively involved and engaged. But now we're starting to see, folks coming in from the Ethereum space, a lot of Solana and Neo protocol, things like that, all coming in and contributing to the protocol. So really just a wide range of different diversity backgrounds, mixes and experiences, which is kind of fun to see.
That's super interesting. Very curious on that matter. Like, have you seen any projects that are initially from other ecosystem also wanting to deploy or have started deploying on Archway?
Yeah, a lot of the Rust-based communities we're starting to pick up. So like anybody like Solana community, because a lot of that development's done on Rust, Neo protocol, so forth. And then we're starting to get a lot of Ethereum folks and other. I'd say the bulk of it right now today is a lot of people in the Cosmos space. But yeah, I think what's so unique and innovative about the protocol is it's not really Cosmos focused. It's really focused on being developer friendly and developer focused. And it's the first time developers basically receive rewards. And so what's so interesting is I think we've actually captured a lot of mindshare in the developer community, less than maybe the general retail community or the general users, but we're growing pretty exponentially at the developer level. And the reason for that is just we've always had this like developer friendly mindset from the beginning. As a community, we have a lot to work on and get better at for sure around support and everything else. But what's so interesting is that's just always been our North Star is to build a community that's extremely developer friendly. And I think developers are starting to take notice, which is cool.
Yeah, totally. I imagine it's something very attractive for developers and for projects. Also, in terms of, since you already started talking about the community, is there any in-person gatherings that the community use to get to know each other or to leverage the relationships on a more human level? Any crypto conferences, or how does that work? Do you have any insights?
Yeah, so during launch, the community threw a party around. There was an Awesome Wasm event, which is an event a little bit more tailored towards the Awesome Wasm community. So there was a bunch of side events and folks gathering there. I don't know how many people ended up going to the party, but the pictures I saw were was basically at full capacity across the board. We definitely had a lot of people from the community over at in Paris around the most recent Paris events. And we most likely can find us, at the major crypto events around the world. There's probably somebody on the ground there. But what's even more interesting now is we're starting to see the community form around more localization. So it's probably not going to be too long before there's like a local meetup in your city. There's definitely ambassadors starting to be represented in each country and each city. And so it's not going to be too long where you're going to be able to probably be able to join a local meetup and local event and get really active in the Archway community, no matter where you're located around the world. So really excited about that and getting that in-person time together. It's so critically important to help each other out and support each other in whatever you're building.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why I ask, because once you connect in person on a human level, like the exchange is much more in depth. And I don't know, it's also some sensation that I have even more after AI thing, as much we go into spreading the levels of connection, is like easier to build something online, but at the same time, how do you build trust? And I still think that on the in person is the best way to build trust. Now still, but yeah, I was wondering, how has the project been impacted by the general sentiment of the crypto space, like regulation issues, or even like the prices you guys were building and even launched the mainnet during still this very turbulent times. How was this experience for you?
Yeah, obviously, it's challenging. I think it's probably challenging for every project. Both inside Phi Labs, our legal team inside Phi Labs, and Foundation's legal team, and all the other core contributors that are contributing, always have had a very mature and constructive outlook on the legal side. We've always followed the law, try to do everything by the book, and so. Really, really happy where we're at on the regulatory front. We've just been just doing everything we can to abide by all the local regulations around the world. That's a good thing. The bear market in general is tough. What's kind of interesting though is if you look at probably some of the biggest protocols by ecosystem. A lot of them got kicked off in the last kind of bear market between 2018 and 2019. And so while the environment is challenging and tough, we actually thought this was the perfect time to launch. It gives us and gives the community a lot of time to build, focus on the fundamentals, building high quality products that people around the world actually want to use. It gives you time to get organized and get structured. I think the community in general has a very long-term mindset point of view. This is going to be probably a multi-year journey here across the board. And so while it is a bear market and things aren't great, we actually think it's the perfect time to just focus on building and building a good community and getting that foundation in place. So the next time there's renewed interest in Web3 and a big scale, and the public comes interested and then gets more interested and starts looking again. Ideally, hopefully, the community is in a really, really good place at that time to basically capture that sentiment change. But yeah, just overall, just building. During this bear market, I think the good thing is, I think a lot of folks in the community understand that, this is the bear market and have kind of set expectations too, which is kind of nice. And it just allows us to really focus on our long-term goals instead of just trying to go for short-term wins.
Agree. Keep building, our mantra.
Yeah, keep building.
And I really like the analogy with the city for crypto networks and ecosystems in general. I'd like to know your perhaps personal opinion or Archway bet, not sure. But if Archway is like in the Archway city, what kind of services and shops that would be the main focus, or that would attract more activity for the next cycle? Do you still think it's like DeFi, or is there something changing on the type of project that people are building?
Yeah. So let me start off here with what we have kind of being built on the protocol right now. There's a bunch of projects, like we have dexes like Astrovault that's up and live. There's liquidity already there. People are using it. There's NFT marketplaces being built and deployed. there's swaps, there's DAO tooling and infrastructure, multi-sigs. For an L1 that just came out of the gate, that doesn't necessarily have as much attention as maybe some other L1s. I was really surprised how big of a community we have already on day one of launch, which is really exciting. And people are using those products. You can definitely go to some of the major explorers and just see all the different wallets and use cases across the board. It's pretty phenomenal just seeing the usage already on chain out of the gate. It's definitely very organic. It feels very bottom up. It doesn't feel like overly hyped. It feels like the community is in a really, really good place right now. But using that city analogy, what makes Archway so unique is it provides this built-in, automated, rewards model built into the protocol for these smart contract developers. So historically, if you're launching a DeFi product, you would launch a governance token. If you're building an NFT marketplace, you would go ahead and sell some. And if you're launching an NFT series, you'd sell some NFTs. Traditionally, that's how you would go about basically getting resources to continue to develop the protocol. What's so unique about Archway is you probably don't need to launch a governance token on Archway. You could if you wanted to. It's certainly a choice. And you can obviously sell NFTs, and that's a great option as well. But what's so unique about the protocol is you get these rewards for just bringing on-chain activity, or basically sometimes people call it selling block space. And so what's unique about this is it provides this rewards model, this revenue model for folks that have a really hard time finding things to have a hard time basically finding a way to build it in a sustainable way. So what's so unique is on top of Ethereum, if you look at the infrastructure, you look at like multi-sigs, for instance, which are really important for anybody who's doing on-chain custody and things like that. To be able to have a multi-sig, well, generally speaking, it's really, really hard to build up a team in a sustainable way because, it really didn't lend itself to launching a governance token. It really didn't lend itself to selling NFTs because it's a multi-sig. So the question is, how do you get rewards for your work at the end of the day if you're building something like a multi-sig? So Archway at the end of the day is that option, that solution. Now you can start to really generate significant amount of rewards based on usage of people using your multi-sig. And so what's so interesting about, I would say, the Archway city compared to a lot of the other cities, it lends itself to use cases that tend to not fit the traditional DeFi mold or NFT mold. It really lends itself to probably more utility-based use cases that have a really hard time monetizing it in a traditional sense. And that's what makes Archway so unique. And I think you're going to see this protocol hasn't been really necessarily classified yet. There were DeFi products before everybody came up with the term decentralized finance, or there were NFTs starting to pop up before NFTs became its own vertical and category. The same thing is probably true with Archway. Is you're going to start to see use cases and applications that really have a hard time surviving on these other L1s and these other ecosystems, but leverage the reward system to build it in a sustainable way, to basically find an on-chain business model for open source code. And so that's what makes it so completely unique. And I would kind of argue, at least initially, some of this is going to be really much around, utility-based use cases. That's one thing that's kind of interesting about the Archway city and Archway ecosystem. But what makes it even, also interesting is once those rewards accrue at a smart contract address, you can do whatever you want with them. So you can redirect them to your governance token holders. You can build referral systems. You can redirect them back to participants in your protocol. You can use it to cover the team. The options and the possibilities are quite great at the end of the day. And so we're going to see all kinds of unique use cases around the utility side, around new use cases that just really had a hard time deploying and finding an on-chain business model be a really, really, really good fit for Archway.
That's super interesting to hear. But it's also, we can notice from outside the ecosystem was already very well developed when launching on Mainnet. Like even for the validator set is already full. Like you have very good structure and community supporting the launch. That was super cool to follow up. And still on the ecosystem side around Archway, do you have any personal takes on the interchain security or replicated security, the ICS-v1 as we share? And most important, what could we expect in terms of consumer chains in Archway? Uh, do you have any plans around that, or have you seen any projects that plan to join instead of building a dApp and just deploying contracts, building a whole new network and just using the validator set of Archway?
Yeah, my own personal feelings, and then inside my labs and the Archway community, it definitely differs. But my personal feelings is ICS. Yeah, it's pretty cool that's technically working. But the challenge I think we have in Web3, and with all security, whether it's interchain security or mesh security or layer twos or any of this type of stuff. Now you're hearing about L3s and things like that. The challenge with all this is they're trying to solve a very specific technical problem here at the end of the day. It's almost like a solution in search of a problem is the right way to say it. I don't think security of a chain, I think it's important, but I don't know if it's necessarily the most important issue. Our community has a totally different mindset. It's all about sustainability and economics at the end of the day. It's not necessarily about being the most secure chain. It's really about how do you build an empowering ecosystem? How do you build sustainable dApps long term? How do you build a dApp without necessarily having to launch a governance token? And that's what makes it so interesting. Is it's really focused on the economic side of things, not necessarily, and using technology to solve the economics problem, not necessarily using technology to solve a technology type problem. Sometimes I look on the internet and I see big Bitcoin mining operations, and they're big warehouses with a bunch of different Bitcoin miners in there, and they're very expensive operations. And what's so cool about the Bitcoin ecosystem and other ecosystems is that protocol basically through incentives basically fueled somebody to go build a whole server warehouse and set up a whole Bitcoin mining operation somewhere around the world, all just by the Bitcoin protocol and writing some software. What's so interesting about the Archway protocol is if we can get the incentives correct for the dApp developers, imagine how impactful this is going to be on those use cases. I mean, it's going to be like the equivalent of Bitcoin mining operations, but at the application and the dApp level. It's just going to be so significant if you can get the incentives just right. And so Archway is really much focused on the economics and the business model problem, less so on the security and the technical security model that ICS or mesh security or any of these other scaling solutions provide.
Yeah, that's definitely a hot topic. It's something that's happening. We're trying to follow up, and the whole community trying to come with ideas and solutions to build. It's I'm very interested on that. But yeah, the other hot topic I think on every ecosystem right now, I think it's around MEV. You mentioned Astrovault. You mentioned Astrovault, that's DAC just launched on Archway. How does MEV works on the stacks or on Archway in general? Is there any concern around MEV?
We're working with some teams that specialize on the MEV side right now. Probably solutions will be implemented soon. Look, MEV, machine extractable value, is very interesting, but the challenge is if you really look at the results of MEV on some of these other Cosmos chains, the reality is it's really not that material at the end of the day. What's more interesting to us is not necessarily MEV, and obviously it's important to give that back to the developers and the community and all that stuff, and there'll probably be solutions that are implemented around that. I know there's lots of work happening right now with third-party teams around that, but within the community. But what's more interesting from my lens and my perspective isn't necessarily MEV, but it's more I would say the inflation, the gas fee rebates, and the contract premiums, and all these other things. To developers, it should mean a lot more. than anything that MEV basically extrapolates. Um, so that's kind of my perspective on things. But yeah, look, the whole premise is like, how do you give back to the community in a more fair and greater way? And that's what the protocol is focused on.
Super cool. Unfortunately, my curiosity is limited by this human invention called time. But I really,
Sure,
really
understand.
enjoyed. I think you also enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Um, I'm curious, would you like to share any final comments? As I don't have any more specific questions right now, but feel free to share.
Yeah, no worries. Feel free, I guess for everybody listening in, come check out the Archway protocol. The website can be found at archway.io or the Twitter handle Archway HQ. I'm sure that'll be attached to the notes in this podcast. But come build, check it out, look what the other DApp developers are doing, think about what's really possible. If you're frustrated and bored about building something that has been done a million times over and want to really try something unique that hasn't been done before, come check out the Archway protocol. I would say the community is really on the cutting edge of a bunch of different things that you're just not going to find in any other L2 or any other ecosystem. So please, we'd love to have you take a look at the protocol and the community, and love to have you get involved.
Great. Thank you very much, Griffin. We will be back soon with other technical discussions and more people that are building the crypto space in general. Thank you very much, guys. See you.
Yeah, thank you.